Hey everybody. Okay, welcome back to another module of Safety Technology book. We're going to go ahead and kick off with module 8.1 right now, 75208, and it's going to be page 8.1. We're going to be talking about JSAs and TSAs, alrighty? We're going to go ahead and talk about job safety analysis and task safety analysis. And let's go ahead and we'll go through and start on page 8.1. And basically, what are we talking about, right? That basically we have to develop methods and controls to prevent any type of accidents or incidents from occurring that can dramatically increase injuries, the potential injuries or illnesses or any type of risk on the job site, right? So what we're going to be doing is that basically keep this in mind, right? Is we want to talk about the reasons for conducting a job safety analysis. What's the most important reason? Being able to protect the employee, right? First and foremost. Also, on top of protecting the employee, protecting the public, and then also maintaining and protecting the quality control of any types of material, tools, equipment, the facilities are also just as equally important as well. So let's go ahead and kick off and let's roll through 2.1.0, and I'm on page 8.2. So recognizing and reducing the risk of potential hazards, right? So what's the main benefit in conducting a JSA? Is it's going to provide that information on potential hazards that are associated with the job task. So basically, the first job with that JSA is going to be basically identifying the risk that we are going to be actively working around, and we're going to go ahead and be able to hopefully start implementing more controls in order to continue minimizing that risk as we work in or around it. So besides identifying those hazards, that JSA is going to help us determine ways to avoid or minimizing that unsafe or unhealthy conditions or those behaviors, right? We want to make sure that our behaviors are in check as well. And identifying hazards and determining what appropriate steps that we're going to take in order to control equipment, in order to control particular hazards, so that we minimize that risk to injury, illness, or fatality. And then also, in addition to that, also that JSA is also going to help us improve our hazard awareness, right? So basically, we may have hazards that we may have maybe not noticed or been hidden to begin with or been underestimated. And oftentimes through the JSA process and walking through the JSA process, it's going to allow us to be able to basically study and analyze the hazards that are going to be associated with the job that we're doing and where we're doing it. Okay. So remember this, folks, and I know we talked about this modules ago, so let's talk about it again, is that remember the employer always has two levels of responsibility at a minimum when it comes to employee safety training. First of all, we got to be trained in the task that we're going to do and where we're going to do it. So let's say if we have welders or pipe fitters, whatever the case is, they're going to have to be trained on the task what they do. And then, of course, we're going to also have to be trained on the hazard awareness based on the task of what we do and also where we're going to do it. So let's say if all of a sudden we are joining pipe, right? Or let's say we're fitting pipe and we're working in an above ground storage tank and it's at ground level. Okay. Kind of need to know that and know what risks are associated, right? But what if all of a sudden we're doing it and it's in an underground cavern, right? Or let's say that it is in a trench or some type of excavation. Well, same welding process, right? But our environment has changed. So you see where I'm going? We have to address the hazards associated with the task itself, and then also where the task is going to take place, because we could have significant greater risk depending on what area that we're working in. Okay. And then another thing it's going to do is it's going to standardize our work practices. So same thing, right? Talking a few weeks ago, like we were discussing that safety, y'all, it's a process. It's a process like so many other things. So basically, let's keep this in mind, right? Let's use for an example, and I'm going to take us to the internet, all right? Let's see. I'm going to take us to the internet. And let's say that we're going to, let me see. Let's say we're going to do pipeline installation, let's say. Okay, so let's say that we have something going on like this, right? Like a pipeline installation project. Okay, I want you to remember this, right? Is that whenever we're working on a pipeline installation process like this, well, it's all this is per the work order, right? The job order. That job order is going to tell us how we're going to pick a pipe, right? How we're going to pick up that pipe, where and what locations we're going to pick it up, how many different pieces of equipment, heavy equipment that we're going to use to be making our lift. All right. All the way down to how we're going to weld it, how we're going to coat it, how we're going to test it. Okay. A holiday tester, right, for coating. So it's gonna incorporate all that different material so that we can maintain quality control of the installation of this pipeline. Remember, safety is the same way. Okay. Safety is a process. So if we follow the program and we follow the process, in turn, we should hopefully at the same time come out without incident, right? Without any type of incident or accident leading to any type of significant injury, illness, or fatality. Okay, so what happens is the JSA and the TSA, the job safety analysis and the task safety analysis, are just another example where safety is part of a process, just like any other process that we'd be working with on the quality control or installation side or servicing side. Okay, all right. So in addition to that, also it helps us facilitate our job, right? Because what's going to happen is that by observing and analyzing a job and the task we're going to be performing, it's going to hopefully do is yield some type of documentation or information that can be useful to us in the future when we're training for the job. So as we remember that the JSA and the JHA, right, the JSA, excuse me, and TSA are living documents, basically meaning that if we observe any new particular hazards or any better, safer practices or conditions that we can implement, well, we want to implement them, but we also want to note them on that JSA so that when those JSAs are being reviewed or when we notify that we ran into certain hazards or potential hazards or better practice, what we start doing is we continue evolving our safety practice, right? Within that task that we do in order to continue perfecting the work process. And by perfecting the work process, what are we doing? We're minimizing that risk to some type of injury, illness, or fatality that might have happened in that work site. Okay. All right. And then also conducting a job safety analysis, right? So what are we talking about here? Well, it depends on the job, right? That we're going to analyze. The conducting a JSA, sometimes it can be a rigorous process. Although JSA involves 5 basic steps. So remember, and this is the thing, right? We want to standardize. We want to select the job to be analyzed. That's number one. First of all, we have to identify and select the job that we're going to be analyzing. And then we want to go ahead and start preparing for that JSA. We want to collect whatever pertinent or necessary information that we need to regarding employees' health, safety, the public's health and safety as well, in certain processes as well, or from the construction of work processes as well. Also, we want to identify hazards and certain risk factors that we may be subject to or involved with, and then also we want to develop solutions. So, how do we develop solutions? Well, we recognize the hazard first, right? And then I think most of you recall, I think back in chapter 1 or 2, module 1 or 2, we talked about REC, recognize a hazard, evaluate the hazard and the potential corrective actions. And then ultimately, we want to implement the controls, right? So recognize, evaluate, and control. And this is a perfect example where the JSA and the TSAs allow us to do that. Okay. So selecting job or task to be analyzed. So let's go ahead and we're going to go through the 5 steps of the process, right? So selecting jobs or tasks to be analyzed. Well, we know that most jobs, right, or every job has a potential to cause some type of serious injury, illnesses, but not every job can be analyzed because JSAs, they're custom and it take a lot of time. Now, I kind of tend to disagree with that, and the reason being is that we tend to JSA or TSA a lot of jobs now in the field. Why? Well, remember, first of all, remember these books were published several years ago, right? These books, I think I want to say they're about 6 or 7 years old now, and what's happened is that we continue adding data to these books. This was a 13th edition, is what it was. So 4 years ago, we continue to add data, right? We continue to improve and implement on our library for JSAs and TSAs. So we don't only do high risk jobs or jobs that we haven't done before, or higher risk jobs or jobs that we haven't done before, but we're also often tend to use it on a regular basis as well. Okay, so selecting that job, of course, like I said, it's gonna be extremely important. And then and we're gonna have priority rating system, right, on the jobs that we select. And what are we gonna select? Okay, what kind of jobs? Well, we got an option of a few, right? We want to make a few options on it. We want to see about the history of the accidents or injuries with that particular job. So if there's a job where we've had a significant amount of injuries, illnesses, close calls, incidents, accidents, it may be a prime candidate for it. Also, something that's got the potential for serious injury. So what do we talk about? Well, could be working in excavation, like the picture that we're showing right now. Could be working around lifts, like we look picking lifts, like we're looking at right now on this picture. Could be working at high altitudes, right? Working on craft, on scaffolds, right? Elevated work surfaces as well. And then in addition to that, also, the newness of the job or the equipment. Is it a job that we do on a regular basis? If so, there may be a little bit less of a requirement to do one. But like I said, in most cases, as most of us know, most of our clients and most of our employers nowadays, they want a JSA done, even if it's Groundhog Day, right? And that's fine, because the biggest thing I tell people is let's just try to recognize whatever new hazards or even existing hazards and continue controlling them, right? And then also anytime when there's been a change in the procedure or the routine. So let's say if all of a sudden we are digging through clay, right, and rock, stable rock, and all of a sudden we hit B or C type soil. Well, I would definitely say that that's a change in the procedure of the routine. Okay. Or let's say for some reason, whatever the case is, we come into work next week and let's say that there's a group, maybe the union that has now been protesting or now has not been invited to return to the work. Well, we have a whole lot of different personnel in there, right? So same thing. New personnel would not be routine, right? It would not be the same old procedure. So that's perfect examples of why we would want it. And then the fifth one, and kind of leads into what we were talking about on the fourth one, which is high turnover rate. Basically, the same employees that were working aren't there, so we need to kind of catch up other employees' to speed. What's the easiest way to do it is to go ahead and done a hazard analysis, okay? And and that's a perfect example of why we would use all those criteria often when selecting what's going to be analyzed. But like I said, ultimately, more and more, we're seeing that more jobs are being, more clients and more jobs are requiring a JSA, even if it is Groundhog Day, and even if it is the same work that we've been doing on a regular basis. And then we want to prepare for the job safety analysis, right? That we want to prepare for the JSA. So what do we want to do? Well, if we want it to be effective, right, or effective as possible, we're gonna have to invest some preparation time. And basically, what we're going to do is that with that JSA, we're going to get in process before data collection begins. So we're going to take a look at general conditions, right, under where the job is being performed, and we're going to develop a list of questions to be answered, and or we're going to do a checklist of items that we have to evaluate. So while conducting the JSA, right? So remember things that we want to include. First of all, do we have adequate lighting? What time are we working? Let me give you an example of adequate lighting. Today is a perfect example. We had a little bit more light today in the evening, right? But what happened this morning, folks? This morning it was a little bit more dark this morning, right? It wasn't normally working conditions. As many of you may have noticed this morning, traffic was a little bit higher than it normally is, and yesterday. And why? Because we're not used to driving in the dark yet, right? In the morning hours, okay? Now we get the benefit in the evening, right around this time of the day, but in the morning we now we're at a little bit greater risk in the morning. Okay. Also, trip hazards, right? Any type of hazards that we may be exposed to tripping in the work site. Could be our own tools, our own equipment. It could be uneven ground conditions. So there's so many different issues on why we might have trip hazards in the workplace as well. Okay. Also, and I tell people this often, right, which is not one of the bullet points, but let me give you an example. Anything that's in a conduit. Often tell employees, right, and I often tell supervisors and leaders, anything that's in around some type of tubing or conduit, you best believe it's probably some source of energy. Okay. It's either electrical wires running in a metal conduit or AC or DC wires. It could be gases under pressure, chemical hazards. It could be pressurized pneumatic, hydraulic. Okay. It could be pressurized powder, like for fire extinguisher or pipe stand systems. So I often tell people, anytime you see anything that's tubular and we're stepping on it, you got to really wonder what's in it, because the majority, almost always, it will have an exposed hazard in it. Okay. And then, of course, live electrical part hazards, fire hazards, tool and equipment that may be in need of repair, and then the ability of personal protective equipment, right? And what are we talking about? PPE limitations. Up to what point is a employee protected, and up to what point could that PPE be inferior, or do we need to go ahead and get into a little bit more protective equipment? And then data collecting, looking at reviewing documentation, absorbing direct observations often, maybe videotaping and reviewing, which video, as most of you know, on work sites, it's going to be excluded. Most host sites do not want us videotaping. Okay, I'm very cautious of videotaping, y'all. I got to be honest with you. I just don't want any issue with the client. I do want to make sure the employee stays safe, and a lot of times I'll go by way of observation. Okay, and then of course group discussions, right? Questions and answers, investments. You may have certain employees that maybe are in a leadership position, or maybe in a position where they're a little more influential on other employees. So we want to keep in mind, and if we can help facilitate that into the group discussion, well, by all means, let's do it. Okay. And then document review as well. The first resource for collecting data is going to be the documentation that's associated with the job that we're analyzing. So what kind of documentation are we talking about? Well, we're looking at things like reports or accidents, right, occurring on the job site. So it could be things like incident reports, right? Could be like our OSHA 300 log, could be incident reports or mishap reports that happen. It could be near misses as well. It could be equipment with property damage, maybe that wasn't reported, and now we're doing a property damage report, regardless of whether it was observed being damaged or not. It could be equipment and tool maintenance logs as well, procedure manuals, material safety data sheets, right? Our MSDS, or nowadays, as we mostly know, it could be our safety data sheets as well. So those are just some examples of a lot of the documentation that we're going to want to review in order to continue on this process, right? And then we're going to be looking for things, right, like patterns, tracking and trending. A lot of times you hear it. You're starting to hear more and more. Let me go ahead and open up another window here. You're starting to hear, if you get an opportunity, check this out on the internet. Big data. Big data is often a big part of human resources. And then also now it's being used in the safety field as well. And basically, big data, what are we talking about? We're talking about collection of information, right? We're talking about collecting of that data, what we're talking about now, because if we gather the correct information and then we go ahead and decipher it, right, study it, what it'll tell us things like our leading and lagging indicators, right? It'll tell us trends. So we may have something where lack of reluctancy or lack of training often may basically hint to a lack of training program that where employees may get hurt, right? But also another one that we often look at nowadays in safety is turnover rate, employee turnover rate. If we have a lot of employees quitting, why are they quitting? And we have to be concerned about it. Are they not getting paid enough? Do they not like their supervisor? Do they feel like they're at risk? Okay. So you want to watch information like that as well. Okay. And then, of course, direct supervision. Or we're talking about direct supervision. Basically, what we're talking about is maybe going to the work site, visiting the work site, watching workers on the job, and then maybe asking to find out about the job and the hazards that are associated. Right. Direct observations. It's the best preferred method because it's going to give us the best perspective of the job. A lot of times, many of you have probably seen behavioral based observation cards, right? Some of the behavioral based observation cards will be asking things like, "Oh, were employees working safely?" Um, PPE being worn, and that's fine. You tend to have some generalized ones like that, but the better behavioral based programs now. Let me give you an example. Is let's say, let me show you. Let's say a Toyota. A lot of things that do these days when we're talking about something like this, like a like an inspection. Let's see. Okay, let's say here you go. Is basically let's say let's grab a powered industrial truck, right? In forklift inspection, well, we can take all this information here basically, and what's okay, we can actually turn around and take this form now and take what's in the visual inspection, and then we can basically convert that into a behavioral based observation, right? So my observation may be something like, let's say it's on ABC um, construction letterhead, right? And then it is a pre-shift inspection checklist or behavioral based. And basically, this is what it's going to say. It's going to say operator, walked around the inspection, right? The forks, the locking pins, and the carriage mast, right? They were secured in place. The wheels were chalked, right, or checked for loose tires and lug nuts. Okay, engine checked for leaks. So what happens is I'm taking an inspections checklist and I'm making a particular to whoever the employee is going to be or the position, and basically start making questions out of what the checklists are. And a lot of times that's going to wind up being a behavioral based safety observation because I'm sure many of us have, right, during the past, either done daily activity reports, done some type of inspections, and basically we've submitted reports that say that all safety operations today were good and safe, right? Um, no one was observed working unsafely. Found the employee without safety gloves and advised them to wear them. So a lot of times they wind up being general audits or assessments like that. But like I said, if we take our inspection checklist, right, for a piece of tools, equipment, materials, and we start implementing what the manufacturer or what the subject matter expert is recommending to us, and we start making those our questions, it really starts to build our behavioral based safety training program. Okay, so that was direct observation, and then videotape and review, right? Video, and not even videotape, just videoing these days, right? With the evolution of the smartphone, if it's acceptable and allowed in the area in which we're in, for security and being intrinsically safe too, right? If we're in some type of potentially explosive environment, well, um, videotape and review, it's a way to collect the data, right, in the camera and place it at the job site to record until the job is done. We can later review it and we can analyze it. So videotape and review, it's going to go ahead and provide a few advantages, right, in the collection data methodology. And basically, what it's going to do is that if we're videotaping someone's performing a job, it's typically going to be less distracting than the observation. And we say that, but I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, and I'll tell you why. If we advise the employee that they're being taped, I'm concerned that they may start getting nervous, maybe more concerned about being taped than if them just performing their job, period, right? Or all of a sudden we tell them that we're going to evaluate them, let's say, on whatever, a powered industrial truck, a forklift, their air tools, pneumatic tools, whatever the case is. And what happens, I think, a lot of times it starts to create a little bit of anxiety or a little bit of nervousness. So people get a little bit more nervous or shy. And I'll give you a perfect example how I'll compare this. Imagine you're driving on the interstate, right? And let's say you're driving from the Louisiana-Mississippi border and we're driving all the way to the Texas border. Well, we're fine until you pull a police officer behind us. Once you put a police officer behind us, we're constantly watching our speed. Not only are we watching our speed, but now we also may, in addition to constantly watching our speed, we may be constantly watching mirrors. We may be distracted. We may be driving too slow. And what happens is almost like we feel that we've done something wrong or that we're going to do something wrong. So that's a perfect example that I tell people that I'm really cautious when it comes to videotape, and also when doing extended observations as well. Okay, all right, and then not only that, but also what about where do we mount the camera so that we don't have to pan or we don't have to move it right so much, or where it doesn't where it causes little disruption as possible. So we also want to make sure that the camera or we are not going to become the hazard ourselves. And then not only that, folks, and then we also have proprietary information, right? We have proprietary information. We have security information, or maybe the facility doesn't want us to do it. So just keep in mind that if it's not our work facility, right, our work site, and our employers don't have the authority to allow us to do taping, then you probably don't want to do it unless you can get authorization from the client, right? And then not only that, also, what about, in addition to all of what we're talking about, is just the overall whole hazard assessment, right? And so just keep that in mind. Okay. All right. So if you look at page 8.4, you'll see the job safety analysis, and there's a basic form, right? And this week you'll see that we're sending out some forms also, and we're going to have our own job safety analysis form. We're just doing some tweaks to what we already had, trying to perfect our documents a little bit more. So you're going to get something like this, right? And basically it's, job title, right? What PPE is going to be required, what type of equipment and tools are required to do this job, the materials that are going to be used, also the date that we're conducting the analysis, who's conducting it, and then how long did it take. Was it a 5-minute analysis? Was it 20 minutes, 30 minutes? Whatever the case may be, right? So there's an example. And what would happen is that on the job safety analysis, we're going to break it down by task. Okay. We're going to break it down by what each task was, the hazard associated with the task, and then the any quality concerns that we may have, and then of course any recommendations that we may have as well. Okay. So this is just a basic JSA. And then, also having those group discussions, right? Having to talk with the team, maybe discussing, seeing if there are any hazards that we may be exposed to, like we said, that we didn't realize, or maybe that employees can kind of give us some additional background on. And then identifying hazards and risk factors, right? Remember this. Remember that hazards and risk identification, it has to be done in 2 steps, right? First, we're going to make the initial observation. We're going to take notes, and and possible risk and hazards, right? And then we're also going to have questions about the task, and questions that we may be asking, right? Is there a danger of striking against, being struck, right? Or harming by coming in contact with something or someone? Can employees be caught in or by between or under? Is there potential for slip, trip, and fall? If so, will it be on the same elevation, or it's going to be on a different elevation? So will the slip, trip, and fall, is it going to be same surface fall, or is it going to be from a higher surface? And then can workers strain themselves by pushing, pulling, bending, lifting, or twisting, right? So ergonomic concerns, of course. And then, is the environment hazardous to anyone's safety or health? So we need to know, is anybody potentially at risk with maybe the chemicals that we're using in the area, the environment itself, okay, the tools or equipment, what risk is it posing to our employees, right? Okay, great. And then 3.5.0, basically developing solutions. This is going to be the final step of that JSA, right? Well, what's it going to be? It's going to be to develop practical methods of making the job safer. The goal is going to be to prevent any occurrence from or potential from happening, right, for an accident or an incident. We've already talked about that. The NCCER does use the difference between accident and incident. I've told you my opinion multiple times, which is I believe that that an accident an accident could have been prevented, and excuse me, an incident could have been prevented. An accident probably could not have been, whereas NCCR is basically stating that an accident is when someone is hurt or there's significant property damage, and an incident is something like more like a near miss. Okay. Um, principal solutions, right, that we considered: finding a safer way to do our job, changing the physical location that creates the hazard, change work methods of procedures in order to eliminate hazards, and then try to reduce the necessity or frequency of doing the job or some of all of the tasks. Okay, so there are some examples of developing those solutions. Okay, so what kind of common errors can we often see when this comes around? Well, that you remember this, right? If we're doing our JSA, there are going to be some common errors that we have to try to avoid. Examples are making the breakdown so detailed that an unnecessary large number of tasks are listed. It's going to have to. It's really more in bulk or in the unity. Okay, making the job so basic that some of the tasks are not covered. Also, right, we've burdened the program too much to the point where we started omitting maybe necessary materials. Failing to identify the education and experience levels of the target audiences. Okay, so we basically fail to identify their levels of experience, expertise, education, and then conducting JSA for all jobs instead of identifying one jobs required for the JSA, right? So basically conducting that JSA for all jobs instead of identifying jobs that require JSAs. So, but the thing is, we do most jobs. Most of us these days, we do end up doing most jobs, do a JSA or at least a global JSA, and then we just add whatever additional information that we need. Okay, and I think a lot of it now being viewed as practice kind of makes perfect, right? So making sure that the employers or employees know that they're doing hazard assessments, and and that way being able to hopefully identify those hazards, right? And then task safety analysis as well. So TSA. So performing that TSA, it's a process as well, right? It's going to identify and evaluate potential hazards that are associated with a given task or work assignment. Once the hazard's been identified, methods of eliminating or controlling the hazard should be developed, and it should be incorporated into our job plan. The TSA, it's typically performed just prior to starting the task. Well, that's where most of us these days understand NCCR's logic and reasoning behind that, but most of us these days are calling that a JSA also. Okay, so just depending. So you don't have to be hooked on the credentials or certifications, but at the same time, give it the opportunity if you can. And I'm noticing more and more that we're calling more of them JSAs, and we're just kind of bundling the whole JSA and TSA tasks together from time to time. Also, TSA is typically performed just prior to the start of the work, like we said, right? Evaluations they may be performed by individually or collectively. The ideal situation, is to have the entire work group get involved in the process, right? I tell people this often. It's kind of rough when you see 3 or 4 employees getting ready for the work site. 1, 2, or 3 employees doing the TSA or the JSA. All employees should be doing the JSA or the TSA. Should be involved in the steps, not just 1 or 2 employees. And and those employees also should not be excluded from the permit process or from the report process, right? So and then, most companies, right, to provide some type of pocket size form with a list of to consider. So we're going to look at two samples that are on the right hand side of TSAs that they're doing these days, or pre-job safety analysis. And remember that doing that pre-job safety briefing or analysis is going to be also JSA, TSA is also going to be part of our in-class evaluation assignment on test day as well. Okay. And then most companies provide, like we said, the pocket size. Also, potential hazards are checked off, or they're noted. PPE requirements are usually indicated, and in most cases, they're gonna speak for the workers. Okay, to sign indicating that they've reviewed the form. So that's what I tell employees. If you haven't reviewed it, we shouldn't be signing it. It's not one or two people to write it and then everybody else to come sign it, right? The reason we're signing it is because we're saying that we reviewed it together and that hopefully we processed it together as well. Okay, because of the Kona learning. So let me take you to the Kona learning and you'll see what I'm talking about. And we're going to be doing it in one of the next chapters as well. And I know we covered this already a couple times, but let's go ahead and just push through and look at it again. So here is the Kona learning. All right. If we lectured, we retain about 10% or less. Look, reading, right at 10%. Okay, audio visual, right? Now we're talking about like video or something like that, about 20%. Demonstration, so basically showing how to do something, about 30%. Discussion and talking, 50%. Practice doing, 75%. I think that's where that JSA comes in, y'all. So that 75%, because they're practicing doing the that particular task or that particular report, and then teaching others how to do it. Now we're looking at around 90. Okay. So also most companies provide, like we said, a pocket size. Some pre-task analysis forms incorporate the JSA process. That's what I was talking about a little bit earlier. We tend to use it as an all-in-one now, which remains listing each step, the associated hazards, and then the appropriate grounds or safe grounds that we're going to consider as well. Okay. And then we're going to complete the pre-task safety analysis. Forms are typically renewed by the supervisor, okay, at the start of the workday or the shift. The forms are also going to be used to audit the site and to oversee work practices as well. Okay. And then pre-task safety safety analysis are conducted each time a new task is assigned. And it's possible for safety message or analysis given an analysis form on any given day, right? So remember, some firms use the TSA for the pre and post job survey safety briefings, and in some cases, workers initially are going to go ahead and complete the form at the end of the day, and it's going to indicate the job was completely and safely done, right? Without incident. So what are we doing? We're looking at a checklist, right? And now what we're doing this for two reasons. It's an additional learning moment to go ahead and review it after the job is done, but also it's giving us a paper trail, right? Saying, okay, when everybody left today at 4:30 p.m., no one reported any injuries. Furthermore, they read the document and they reported that no one had been injured. So not only had they not reported injuries, they actually reported that there were no injuries for the day. Okay. And then TSA analysis, task safety analysis versus job safety analysis. So give me 1 second. We're going to go ahead and kind of push through that a little bit. So TSAs and JSAs, right? Like we said, they're both tools that identify the hazards. There's going to be three major differences, right? It's going to be the timing, the level of detail, and then the use, okay? So basically TSAs, they're typically prior to starting a task, and they don't include a high level of detail, right? So JSAs, they're normally typically done in advance and contain more specific detail, right? And then the JSA are more formal, and they include job steps, while TSAs are more general and they usually don't include job steps. Okay, so keep that in mind, right? Let me read that again, folks. JSAs are more formal and they include key job steps. So we maintain its steps, and then TSAs are more general and usually they do not include each job step, right? Okay. And then JSAs are typically done for reoccurring, a repetitive task. Okay. And they're usually retrained and referenced. The completed JSA, often it's going to become the basis for standard operating or process procedures. So basically, it often will become like part of the SOP if we see that we're regularly doing it and employees are being prevented from being injured or ill. And then, however, when we perform any type of TSA, one should ask, right? Do we have any JSAs or standard operating procedure, right? SOP that would cover the job at hand. So if we have a JSA already or a job at hand, we may be incorporating that into our awareness program at that point, right? Also, both processes can be helpful in accident prevention, right? And then by the intent and the use of each has to be addressed in the company procedures, and it's got to be clearly understood. Both processes we're required to do training, right, on hazard recognition, evaluation, and control. Remember I talked about earlier, REC, recognize, evaluation, and control. We need to recognize the hazard or potential hazard. We need to review or evaluate potential fixes and potential hazards on what may happen or the standards. And ultimately, we need to go ahead and control the hazard, right? Using the engineering, the administrative, and PPE controls. Okay. And then let me come back, folks, to page 8.7, and we're going to break out in just a minute. Look at page 8.7, and there's two examples of a pre-job safety task, right? Hazard analysis. And then look at the first one. The first one on the left is the task or work that's being performed. What is it? Right? The tools, equipment, and material that's involved. We'll go into different physical hazards, falls from the same level, falls from elevation, pinch points, rotating, electrical hazards, hot, cold, struck by fallen objects, right? Sharp objects, and then any type of chemical hazards. Flammable materials, reactive materials, corrosives, toxics, hazardous waste, biohazards, radiation hazards, and then other as well, right? And then, of course, energy services, we'd be talking about what's the energy, right? Is it electric? Is it pneumatic? Is it hydraulic? Okay. Is it noise? Is it machine guarding? Okay. Is it, depending on what it is, right? And then what could happen, or go wrong if we have the release? How can it be eliminated or controlled, right? I'll tell you what, a lot of the things these days can be regulated or can be evaluated and controlled, but it's part of the JSA process or the TSA process. Okay, because that's how we identify them, and then we start making the right decisions. And then on the right hand side, you'll see another one. You'll see a pre-job safety briefing and task hazard analysis, right? And they're asking if permits are required. This is the second half of it, right? Excuse me. If we're doing any welding or burning, what processes are we doing, right? Lockout, tag out, excavation, line entry, electrical work, confined space, critical lifts. And we talked about last week, critical lifts will be over 75% of the crane's capacity or 75% of its rigging capacity. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and also see vehicle entry, and then safety glasses, goggles, all the PPE, right? Face shields, SCBAs, respirators, gloves, chemical suits, head protection, safety shoes, body harnesses, lanyards, lifelines, and any other safety provisions that we're going to have to take. Okay, so that kind of gives us a breakdown, folks, of the whole JSA TSA process for the most part. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm looking to see. I thought there was one more thing I was going to want to cover in here. Give me 1 second. Okay, no, that's it. So there, that goes ahead and tells a lot about the JSA and TSA. All right. Let's do this, folks. It is that's the end of module 8.1. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and break out. It is right now 7:53. Why don't we take a 12-minute break? I'm gonna leave the webinar open, folks. All right. I'm just gonna mute the screen. Mute the volume. I'm gonna leave the screen open and everything. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and break out. Let's go ahead and come back on at 5 minutes till 5 minutes after. We'll start making our way back, and between, let's say, 8 after the hour, we'll go ahead and kick it back off. Okay, and then when we come back on, we're going to go ahead and cover module 9, and then we should be, after module 9, we should be closing down for the night. Okay, and now I should still be able to get you out in the regular scheduled time. So I'll see you. Let's break out, folks, and I'll see you in about another 12-13 minutes. Okay, thank you. All righty, everybody. So we're going to go ahead and get back in, okay? We're going to go ahead and move on to Module 9 now. So it's going to be page 9.1. And now what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about safety, orientation, and training, okay, throughout this module. So this module is just a little bit longer, but it's still, I think it's about 16, 17 pages. So it should go pretty smoothly as well. And still get you off on time tonight to go ahead and handle all your personal business, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about it for a minute. So first of all, right, in order to have a safe work site, what do we need, right? We need to have a safe working environment. We need to have management that supports our safety program. So basically, we have to have corporate buy-in, right? Basically, our employer to give us the allocate the funds for our department in order to make significant improvements and maintain quality of safety. Also, to be able to implement new safety programs and put committees together, and also workers who have and in addition to that, workers that are motivated, right, to work safely, and who have the knowledge and the skills to do so. Now, I'm not talking about just safety personnel here. I'm talking about all personnel, right? We need all employees. We all need to have that commitment to safety, and also a safety orientation program. We have to have training help to ensure that our workforce is knowledgeable about the safe work practices, company policies, safety rules and regulations. And in addition to that, another way is through craft training, right? So a craft training, perfect example, just like this NCCER CSST that we're doing here. Um, Craft training, let me give you an example. Let's go back to the NCCER website. Okay. I think the front page is down, so I'm going in through one of the back pages, and then I'm going to bring us where we need to go. Okay, so all I did was bring us into one of the back pages for anybody who is curious as to what I did. Okay, um, the curriculum. Here you go. All these materials, all these different lists you see here. Anything from carpentry, right, drywall, electrical, gas pipeline operations, heavy highway, HVAC, hydroblasting, plumbing. This is just to name a few, right? Pipe fitting, painting, pipe layers. These are all different riggers, signal persons. These are all different crafts that NCCR has as well, folks. So, most of us in our industry know NCCR more for the safety, but actually they're a much bigger outfit. Their primary was craft training, and then of course incorporated the safety program, the CSST and CSSS programs into it. Okay, so there you go. There's the different craft areas. So what's happened in our workforce, and we had a discussion this today. We're teaching a 510 here in New Orleans this week, and we had this discussion today, which is that what we've lost a lot of in our workforce is quality craft labor. Okay, qualified electricians, right? Qualified pipe fitters, qualified welders. So where we tend to have a big gap right now. I saw it on the news the other day, and they called it. They called it. Give me 1 second. Let me pull it up for you. They call it middle skill jobs right here. All right, middle skill jobs list, and this was actually on World News over this past weekend. And it goes on to talk about it's a lot of STEM, science, excuse me, science, technology, engineering, and math. Okay, it also addresses a lot of all genders, but a lot of women in the workplace also. Okay, a lot of females in the workplace, and you can go in here and they have a few different articles which are really good, talking about what I was just talking about, the skills gap, right? The pace of change in technology that we have to keep up with the increasing changes in technology. Okay, retiring baby boomers, so many older people in the workplace. So we're going to have gaps of age gaps with middle to lower supervision. And we're also going to have skilled gaps because technology growing so fast, right? That we need to now not only have now work experience or OJT is not sufficient, right? Just on job training. We also have to have a lot of internet skills, smartphone or application skills, electronics. So what's happening is we have the older generation that maybe isn't as tech savvy, let's say, and we have the newer generation that really doesn't have the OJT or maybe even the demeanor, right, that the older generation does. So somewhere in there, we have to kind of blend both in order to continue moving forward. Okay, so like I said, it's those are some really good articles, and like I said, it's called Middle Skills Jobs. Okay. And just to give you an example, middle skill jobs, a lot of it will be like fab shops and machine shops that are more precision work. I guess precision is probably the best word to use. And they were talking about the other day that a lot of those jobs are paying mid 40s to low 50s, all the way up into $80,000 price range per year. Okay. All right, good. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about, of course, new hire orientation, right? And part of what we have to do, and let's recall this, right? And let's keep this in mind and not lose focus, is that the more we front load the work, hopefully, the safer we're keeping our employees, right? Hopefully, the safer we are in the workplace. So really, it's imperative that we front load the training and make sure that we invest enough time into making sure that our employees are adequately trained and know what their expectations are, and that are and then that adequately aware of what they need to do. Okay, and then any new employees, right? Workers receive a lot of new information all the time, and and then in addition to that, also we should plan on breaking it down, the training down, right, into two sections. The first section, it's going to be the new employee orientation, right? It should be the general overview of the company policies and the safety rules. The second type of training should be site specific, okay, that exist on the job, right? Preventative measures to minimize the risk of accidents, contingency plans, okay, cases of accidents. And we may want to also cover certain subjects like the chain of command, who's in charge, right? Who we should answer to, where to go for help in case of an emergency, right? It could be company security, could be a supervisor, could be HR, could be safety. Also, a walkthrough tour of the job site showing the safety equipment and the escape routes. Okay, not just telling employees where the escape routes are, but maybe often showing them as well. Use the standard PPE, right? Using what the traditional minimal PPE is. Also, a description of any hazardous materials that are used on site. Um, emergency reporting and responding procedures, and then emergency action plans, let's say, and then where to find the safety data sheets, right? Whether they're electronic or whether they're hard copies of both. Now, I'm gonna go a step further. I agree with the orientation, right? I agree with uh, breaking it down to site specific, but also being site specific. Also, it's not just the safety training, but it may be their craft training as well. Okay, so basic orientation, yeah, that's really important. But also, the rest of the training often is going to be broken down into two sections in itself. One section is going to be the skill training, right? If I have someone that is a scaffold builder, they need to know how to build a scaffold. And then the second part of that is they need to be hazard awareness trained on the risk associated with building a scaffold and in where they're going to build it. Like, are they building it inside of an above ground storage tank? Are they building it hanging off the side of a building or a bridge? Are they building it inside of a trench? Okay. Or on top of some ground conditions that may not be ideal. Okay. So secure, but not ideal, right? Okay, so job specific training. What are we talking about? 2.2.0. Job specific training. It should be offered to new employees, right? Anyone acquiring a new job or duties, and anyone whose safety practices need improvement. So, what does the trainer? What should it cover? Well, it should be specific to correct work procedures. It should include the care, use, and limitations of all pieces of required PPE. Um, It should include the risks that are associated with any type of harmful or hazardous material, including warning materials used. Excuse me, including hazardous materials that are used. Right. It includes warning properties, symptoms of overdose, first aid, and then cleanup procedure for spills as well. Job specific training, it should include all dimensions and hands on practice if possible, right? So maybe simulating a material release spill, or a bloodborne pathogen a spill, right? And how to simulate and show them how to do that safely and correctly. Why do we want to do that? We want to go back to this Kona learning, right? That practicing doing. We want to get them into the 75% range right here. Okay, they want to get us right into 75% range, because that way we know that there's a better retention opportunity for retention. Okay, so OSHA 1926.21, basically it's going to require that employers have to instruct each employee in the recognition and avoidance of unsafe conditions. Okay, the regulations applicable to his work environment, right? To control and eliminate any hazards or exposures that could possibly make an employee injured, ill, or even kill him, right? The regulations are commonly known as the right to know rule. Right to know, best thing I can tell you is hazardous chemicals. Let me show you an example. It's going to be EPA. A lot of people think that HAZCOM was all really for the workplace. So let me show you, right? So we're talking about OSHA HAZCOM. We're talking about right here, OSHA hazardous communication. Okay, the hazardous communication standard. Okay, but what we don't often realize. Let me see if I can pull up one of the images. Okay, and what we don't often realize, okay, is the OSHA communication standard. We also want to keep this in mind. Is the let's see, is the EPA right to know, right? So basically, EPA right to know. What's it mean? Hey, it's we've got to right to know what chemicals are being manufactured, produced, stored, okay, transported through, wholesaled, retailed in our communities. Okay, it can be anything. That whole right to know, it could be, is there ammonia, right? Is there hydrochloric acid, right? Is there any type of crude oil, any type of chemical that may be considered hazardous or lethal? We have the right to know if it's in our community. But furthermore, we also have the right to know basically how we can safely clean it up if there's a release, right? How to properly handle it, what first aid measures are. So all the questions that come on your safety data training, okay? Your safety data sheets, right? Your SDS training, okay? And then, also in addition to that, let's talk about supervisory training for a minute, right? It plays a big role in ensuring that workplace safety. We have to minimize the effectiveness of safety training in order to minimize the effectiveness, right? Uh, uh, Safety training should be provided for supervisors. Supervisory safety training should accomplish the following. This is what we want to make sure that supervisory training safety training is going to do. It's going to reinforce the company's commitment to a safe work environment, right? It's going to make employees feel that the company, the corporate entity has buy-in. Also, it's going to review in detail the company's safety policies and procedures. It's going to explain how to analyze a job to look for potential health and risk, right? So basically, how to identify hazards and analyze them. Okay. It's going to explain how to conduct safety meetings, um, describe what to do when an unsafe condition exists. Also, it's going to describe policy and procedures to follow after an accident, right? It's going to explain how to coach, counsel, and discipline employees. And then explain how to investigate and document an accident, right? An incident, or let's say injury, illness, or fatality, let's say, right? Even a near miss. And then supervisors have the ability to set the tone for the workers. So the supervisor who looks out for the worker safety, they're going to be kept, they're going to help keep accidents at a minimum, right? So, but also you have other employees or other supervisors that often become tacit. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to pull up tacit approval for you in just a moment, the definition of it, okay? So, because what happens is, in order to do things effectively, we have to be, every supervisor should go through some type of specific supervisor training, right? So, supervising is a process. So, yes, we should treat it as such, and we should also have training on that process. All right. So let me pull up a couple things for you real quick. Let me pull up the definition of tacit approval for anybody who hasn't heard of it before. So what happens is not spoken, right? It's indicated tacit approval by smiling or winking of the eye. We're going to imply or we're going to infer that from statements that management's given the tacit approval to the plan. So let me give you an example of that, right? Tacit approval would be the wink of an eye. The, hey, get her done, right? Don't worry about it. We're going to just make sure the report comes to me and I'm going to handle it, make sure everything gets covered. So basically we start covering, we start allowing, we start non-reporting, we not taking discipline, we start cutting corners. All of that are examples of tacit approval, okay? So let's talk about the job instructional training, right? JIT. And you really won't see the JIT acronym in a whole lot of places, okay? Basically, a large portion of the construction safety training is done in the field, right? By the crew leader, or the supervisor. So one technique for it is going to be training is job instructional training, right? So about job instructional training, like OJT, basically, right? On the job training. So job instructional training is particularly helpful for training workers how to do particular tasks. So the following steps are used to prepare and present a JIT, right? So we're going to prepare the participants by using certain techniques, right? We're going to put them at ease. We're going to explain the job in detail. We're going to define the quality standards. We're going to explain the importance of doing a job properly, right? And then second of all, we're going to present the operation, right? We're going to demonstrate each step of the job. We're going to explain, or the employer is going to explain why the sequence is important. Going back to process, right? Okay. Encourage questions and then stress key points. And then also, in addition to that, what about trying out performance, right? So watching the participant do the job, basically an evaluation of them, right? Oversight. Have the participant explain each step. A lot of NCCER craft training is like that. Is demonstrating the steps as you do it. We're going to do that in evaluations with all of you. We're going to talk. You're going to walk me through the evaluations as you're doing them. So it's going to be part of the assessment. Okay, that's why it's going to go pretty smoothly. Also, in addition to that, being patient and then trying to anticipate questions, right? And then follow up, making observations after the training, giving praise for proper activities, giving suggestions when necessary, and then encouraging questions. So just remember this, right? That coordinating the training program, okay, it's going to mean inviting the right people to be participants, right? Getting a classroom that can accommodate all the people, making sure that there's enough room for any type of necessary equipment, and that all the participants are available at the same time. So this is why training is so hard, because we have to coordinate all these different aspects without employees being on sick day or taking personal time off, right? Or management saying, oh, okay, well, they learned half of it, or the first half of the 8-hour course, and all of a sudden now, after 4 hours, we're already signing certificates or proving that they met the standard, right? And then, in addition to that, also JIT, right, is a large portion of the construction site training is done in the field by crew leaders, right, like we were talking about right now. So let's go back to, let's see, we did coordinating the training program, and then let's identify and invite the correct people, right? So we need to talk to the crew supervisor, the foreman, work out together who should be invited to the class. If there's a large number of participants, we should want to drive. We want to drive them up into more than one class, right? Divide them up into more than one class. A lot of times, especially when it's shift work, we'll go ahead and break them apart in different classes. I'll give you an example. OSHA mandates that training doesn't exceed 40 people, okay, when it's the OSHA 10 hour, 30 hour, or the 510, or the 511, the 500. 40 person is the max for any of the OSHA courses, and preferred usually is going to stay right around 20, maybe even a little bit less. Okay. It's important to establish entrance requirements because we want to be sure that everyone's attending the class, right, has received the necessary prerequisite training. So if we're teaching a confined space course, we may want to see if the require that all personnel taking the course have received the right prior training in selecting and using respirators, right? A lot of times it's okay. Well, we're going to do a refresher, but if we're doing a refresher, that means you've had to been trained the first time, right? So making sure that they've had their preliminary training done as well, and then required prerequisite training should be included, in our course announcement, right? We should verify that all entrants have received the training. If someone haven't, they should consider providing them with the required training before the class starts. So that way we get them up to speed, right? That way they hopefully get to a close enough degree that other employees are already being or already being allocated or enrolled in. Okay, and then we want to obtain a secure classroom, right? So what are we talking about? Um, Even if the majority of the class is going to be hands-free, right? Hands-on course with equipment, we still need a classroom area to conduct the class. Especially if we plan to use transparencies, flip charts, or whiteboards. So because we have to have access to all these materials, right? Um, Also work with the administrative staff, uh, facility crews, supervisors to obtain just give me 1 second, to obtain and secure our classroom space, right, as close as possible to the equipment on which we're going to be training. Some activities have classrooms or conference rooms um, available. Occasionally, training must be conducted in the lunchroom, break room, or office. Sometimes it has to be, right? So we would prefer its own isolated area if at all possible. And then it's important to make sure that our area for having a classroom is going to be large enough, right, to accommodate all of the participants in the room, okay, in the class. We want to coordinate the room and participant availability. So we want to schedule a course. We don't want to schedule when employees have a different training class for something else going on, right? Or if they're going to be traveling to fire school or rescue school or whatever the case is. But we also, at the same time, want to make sure that we have sufficient training as well, right? Also, the method of training, right? There's more than one effective training that's simply going to tell a room full of people what the subject matter is about, right? So it goes back to the code of learning. If you look there at the bottom, we've talked about the code of learning multiple times, and there you are. There's the list of it at 4.0.0. And then the sequence for to train, right? We want to train, and this is one thing I want you to remember. Whenever we train, we want to train in a logical order. Okay. So the best way to prevent the information from becoming overwhelming is to treat train material logically, right? We're gonna start with the known, and we're gonna go to the unknown. So we're gonna start with what employees know. Let's say if we're talking about fire watch, right, and LEL, lower explosive limit, lower flammability limit, different type of fire extinguishers, BC, carbon dioxide. Well, maybe employees aren't that comfortable with that in-depth training. So let's start with an employer's responsibility to be a fire watch, right? And then let's get them out into the field. And then the more we talk to them, the more we educate them and train them, the more comfortable they'll feel as we start raising the bar to the training material that we want to make them privy to, right? In order to help protect them and protect all the coworkers. And then the demonstration, right? It may be the most effective if you start with a small controlled fire, outside of a safe area, right? So let's talk about like fire extinguisher, perfect example. So preferably hands-on, right? We can simulate a fire extinguisher. We can use a FARC, what you call it, like one of these electronics or um, virtual fire extinguisher training programs. But the best way is always going to be hands-on. Okay. Going back to the cone of learning, right? What happens? 75%. That's the goal that we're trying to get into. And then what, why, and how. It's a great way to break down factual information for a class. So we want to use these 3 key questions, consistently, right? As we describe safety rules, equipment operation, the use of PPE. So let me give you an example on this, right? We might use the what, why, and how method to teach the use of hearing protection, but first showing and discussing the different types of hearing protection devices, right? So after thoroughly reviewing what equipment is used to protect someone's hearing, we want to discuss why it's important to use the hearing protection equipment. And then finally, we want to teach the workers to use hearing protective equipment, right? Their PPE basically. And in addition to that, the how-to portion of the lesson would probably lead to be more a detailed session, right? Using the know, should, do method to teach participants on when and how they're going to select their hearing protection, right? So, hey, we want to look at them and say, okay, we need to know the hazard. So by doing a particular hazard, let's go ahead and show you what you should be wearing, right? Or how to protect yourself, and then do the method here. We want to teach you what you should be wearing hearing protection wise, and then we're going to show you how to use the hearing protection, okay? And with limitations that it has. Also, hands-on practices and demonstrations are great example. And like I said, perfect example is on the list that we have on the board is that whole cone learning again, that 75%, right? The practice of doing. And then possibly using simulators as well is a perfect example. So, for example, it might be too risky or costly to have new forklift drivers begin by operating a forklift, right? So, what could we do? We bring in technology and bring in some type of simulator so that if something happens or they miss, they're not missing. They're not damaging real equipment, right? That it's hopefully contained to a simulator. Okay, it may also take away some of the potential hazards or a risk associated with employees that are going to be in the area, right? So, perfect example. Okay, so things that we want to keep in mind that we're going to need, right, as we prepare to train. Make sure that we have either a laptop. Not only a laptop, folks, I tell everybody, let's have a backup plan. Look at tonight. Tonight was a perfect example. Is we were having problems logging on, and so what I was going to do was if we couldn't be live, we were going to go ahead and record a session here and upload it later on this evening or tomorrow, so everybody would have something that they could still watch and not lose the time, right? If not, we were going to go to a live session tomorrow night, which also would have been another alternative. So, just one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we take considerations for those types of training or preparations that need to be made, right? And make sure we have an adequate portable screen. Make sure that we have a laptop that Nick hasn't messed up yet. Excuse me, a laptop that somebody hasn't messed up yet, right? Or maybe that freezes or anything like that, or a projector. Okay, and then prepare to train, right? So practice with the equipment that we have. Like I said, have that plan B in your back pocket. Let me give you an example, folks. At the New Orleans State Police Training Center years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, I set up a bunch of workshops. Okay, I set up a bunch of definitions and workshops and worksheets that I'd done on my own. And I get to the training course, and what happens? I can't get the projector to work, right? Couldn't get the projector to work. They finally came and fixed it for me. After they wound up fixing it, projector blew a bulb that same day. So I was out of a projector for almost the whole day out of a 3.5 day course. But I had brought enough workshops with me. My intention wasn't to use that from the beginning, but I packed Plan B with me, right? I designed a pack Plan B with me, and course came out great. They really did a great job. I mean, don't get me wrong. We always want the video if we can at all do it, but at the same time, it's not always possible, right? Especially if we're training in the field, if we're training in some type of cool down tent, or training during breaks, or maybe in in a break area during the work site. So many different reasons, right? And then let's see. Give me 1 second. Um, I'll give you. Go ahead and take the next minute or so. Just read over. Just read over the visual aids, folks. You'll see table 1 right there. Just read over it real quick. I'll give you the next minute or two, so you guys can read over that. Okay, and then we'll keep on going. And as you see, it'll have the visual aid. It gives us the use, different advantages, disadvantages, and then requirements. Okay, so I'll give you. Let's say it's 8:38. So just take a couple minutes, read that, and then we're going to keep on going. Okay. Alrighty, folks. So as you see, right, there's different audiovisual aids there, use, advantages, disadvantages, requirements, just depending, right, whether we use an overhead transparencies, which you don't see that much anymore, but believe it or not, they're actually making a bigger comeback. So let me show you if I can show you really quickly, okay? Let's see. So overhead project, we're so used to seeing something like this, right, folks? Like overhead transparencies like this, like clear sods and stuff. This used to be the old days. Let me show you excuse me, I don't. Okay, there you go. Something like that, right? Okay, let me show you what the newer ones are looking like now. The newer ones are looking like this now, folks. So now you can take that same form, right? And now you can point that form down, and it's a camera, and so it no longer has to be transparent. It can be a handout. It can be a solid sheet of paper, right? Something like your book sheet or something like that, and it will give us a transparency of what, or make it look like transparency on the board or projector. Okay, so just an example of how that is as that technology is coming along and really helping us out. Okay, so there's some more examples of it, different ones. Here's a different type right here. There you go. Okay, so that's all out there for us also. Okay, and then in addition to that is also seating, right? So we want for our classroom preparation. How are we going to seat them? A lot of times the traditional classrooms nowadays. Let's see if I can pull up something really quickly for us. Let's see. All right, so we know obviously we have things like traditional classrooms, right? Everybody facing forward, like something. This is called the U inside of a U, or two L's. I'll show you that in just a second. But it could be just everybody facing forward as well, right? So what we want to do is try to keep as much engagement as possible, folks. So here's some examples of it also. This is, like I was saying, this is called a U inside of a U here, okay, or an L. So you see the inside U here, okay, then the outside row coming around, but there's also right here, this open. So as an instructor, I can move through. A lot of times I'll tell you what I do, actually in this 510 that we're doing this week, instead of going to a U, which normally connects just like that, okay, not rounded at the bottom like you have on page 9.7, but just flat. This is exactly what I did this past week. I did three sets of tables like this too, and then took an L out. Okay, so that way I almost call it like two L's or like a U split up the middle, right? And then this whole section is not here. But what happens? I can walk in and out like this. I can come around the desk here, and what I'm doing is I'm not trapped here by either trying to come behind these people or going behind the other side. Okay, so it just makes it more accessible for me. I realize it makes it more accessible for them as well. Okay, so considering your seating setups, right? So it could be something like that. It could be there you go again. It could be regular seating, something like this, right? Like desk or theater style. Let's see. Okay, it could be this. This is called, of course, it could be all round table like this, conferences, which I don't really care for because so many people face the back. It could be chevron. It could be a three-column chevron like this, or just two. This one coming like this, and then the second one coming like this, with the middle one being gone. Okay, so just depending on, let me see, chevron. There you go, right there, like something like this, right, or like this, better yet. Okay. So we have different options of how we can set up, right, in order to try to keep people engaged. I do this. I also do a big conference table, right? So let's see. I'll just basically do a basically a 16 or 14, 16, 18 person conference table. And the reason I do that is so everybody can kind of talk at will and have a discussion. So let's see. Yeah, I was looking for a big conference table, something like this, right? Basically, that's what I'm talking about. It could be longer, right? And just rows down one way, rows down the other, a couple chairs on the backside. It's kind of like a U, except you just can't walk it. But it also makes a much more casual environment because even as an instructor at this point, I'll probably sit down with my class, y'all. That way, I become part of the group. Okay, so just different options depending on what your needs are, depending on who your group is, right? Whether how formal or informal, how formal or how informal they are. Okay, so there's a bunch of different just examples that there are for you. Okay, and then delivery of training 6.0.0. After adequate preparation and planning, right, we're ready to conduct the training. So, even though conducting a training session may seem like a daunting, a frightening situation, the more we prepare, the more it's going to run smoothly, right? The more we prepare, the more comfortable we're going to be with it, okay? And then course and instructor introductions, right? It's important to set up the proper tone for the class. We don't want to come in too dry, right? We don't want to come in and just the facts, ma'am, right? So this is what I tell people, folks, a lot of times is try to think of a question. Try to think of a question that you can propose or that you can give to employees or to attendees while you're training them. Okay, so let me give you an example. Um, if I'm teaching H2S, I teach the 2.5 and 4 hour H2S training class, right? I teach a trainer class. Well, when I get when employees start talking about H2S, I'll ask them. I'll say, hey, anybody ever has anybody ever been worn a Cricket, right? A personal monitor. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a single gas monitor, right? So let's go to the photo for anybody who's not familiar. That's what I'm talking about, right? Has anybody worn a Cricket or a single gas monitor? If so, why did you wear it? What environment did you wear it in, right? what was that risk of H2S. Have you ever smelled H2S? So what I do is from jump is that as soon as I start training, I start asking questions. That way it gives me input. Okay. That way I'm not working harder or all of a sudden I'm just talking, and I'm already starting to wonder if my crowd is engaged. Okay. So what I'm doing is rather than pulling all the answers out of them, I'm basically just opening them up and I'm basically looking for, an answer um, in order to determine their needs or their skills and to be able to assess them. Okay, and then so that goes for course instructor introductions, and then class administration. Right, I'm at 6 point. I'm at. Just give me 1 second, folks. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix my screen here. Okay, I'm at 6.2.0 class administration. So certain key points of information, right, that should be addressed to help the participants feel more comfortable. Okay, they're going to include daily start and end times, right? The frequency and length of each breaks, or whenever we're going to propose breaks. Um, the participants they'll definitely appreciate knowing, right? They'll appreciate knowing what time they're going to get out. I'll tell you another one that I get a lot is them wanting to know what to expect on the test. It seems like many of us often are so concerned about test anxiety, and I often tell people is I can't guarantee that everybody's going to pass the test, but as long as they apply themselves and I apply myself to do the training, that it should definitely give us a step in the right direction. Okay. All right. And then, of course, ice breaking activities. And that's what I was kind of talking about. So, as far as ice breaking activities, um, take the training class, right? And so they don't feel like it's just humdrum or typical artificial group. Maybe we want to go ahead and try some ice breaking activities. Okay, so one of the examples would be, like I said, things like Q&A, right? Why are you here? What are you looking for? Also, like I said, some type of game or activity as well. Okay. Like I said, I often start with a question, right? So you may want to write down the responses down on a sheet or a flip chart. Okay. And then that way we can have them for reference later. A lot of times, maybe break up your people into groups. Let's say if you have a larger group, give them flip charts and then give them a question, right? Why are you here? What do you want to learn? And then they can write together a group answer. Mate, it could be individual, right? They could list. Let's say if they have 4 people, it could be one A, B, C, and D, and they each have a reason why the main reason they're there. What training have you had before in confined space and air quality monitoring? And then one, two A, B, C, D, and then they answer again. Okay. So just perfect examples. Okay. So different, games and brain teasers and icebreakers and things like that. Okay, so if you ever looking for something like that, easiest thing to do is this: you can go to the internet and you can do training icebreaking games, right? Training icebreakers. And then you can go in here and start looking up different icebreakers, right? That people may do. Another one you can do is, let's say you have a team of people and you tell them, okay, I want you to draw something, right? And you have each group and you say the first one's going to draw the house, second one's going to draw the chimney, third one's going to draw the door, the next one's going to draw the yard, the next one's going to draw the fence, right? Whatever the case may be. And what it's going to show is, let's say we have 4 or 5 different groups. It's going to show that everybody's house and everybody's fireplace and door looks totally different. So I like to use that a lot of times, like things like that, because it goes to show how the difference of opinion and how we see things, and also our ability or quality to draw, how it totally affects how we often have a perspective out there, right? So just different ways of like ice breaking activities. Okay. Also, review the class objectives. Tell them what we're there to learn, right? What we're there to learn, and also, more importantly for me, why we're there to learn it. Okay, and the objective should basically be the statement of what we're doing there, right? So NCCR here, they illustrate. Let me go ahead and read a little bit of this, okay? So before jumping into the course content, it's important to review that the course is objective with the class. So a learning objective is a statement, right? What the learners are going to be expected to do once they fulfill the instructions. So let's say if this is H2S training, perfect example is I don't want to say something like by the end of this course, you will know the characteristics of H2S and you will know the responsibilities of the employee to adequately evacuate. Okay, that's not a fair statement. But what I can say is that by the end of this training, okay, participants will be able to list at least 2 or 3 different characteristics of the smell for H2S. Employees will be able to list multiple aliases for what H2S is used for. Okay, so what I start doing is I start being more specific to rather than just very generalized. Okay, we can't prove that somebody knew something or that somebody understood something, but we can prove that they can list it, right? That they can identify the hazards, that they can itemize the list. Okay, items like that. Okay, so it's more specificity, and more importantly, it's measurable. And maybe that's the best word to look for is that they're measurable objectives. Okay, okay, so when we're talking about a lot of times, just remember this, right? It's called the ABCD method, and it's basically assessing who our audience is, right? And what we're doing is it explains the conditions and the behaviors in an action, right? So or behaviors being the action. So we want to identify who our audience is, right? We want to identify what behaviors they have, or maybe what behaviors we want them to have, right? Like hazard identification, let's say around crane and rigging, right? Or hazard identification around hand and power tools. All right, and then we want to establish what the condition is, and then what the degree is as well. Okay, so it's called the ABCD method, and often you'll see it in practice as well. Okay, and we're gonna, as we go through next week, we're gonna speak a little bit more about this ABCD method. Okay, so we're gonna, just so you know, we're gonna be coming back to that as well. And then classroom management, right? As the instructor, we want to make sure that we're responsible, and we know that we're responsible for making sure that the class runs smoothly, right? That it runs on schedule, that it meets its objectives. Um, task This task, it's known for our classroom management, is often going to be taking care of itself, right? And we have to be adequately prepared. We have to be organized, and we have to outline our class. Classroom management covers 3 primary elements, right? It's the pace of our instruction, right? At what pace are we going to roll? Perfect example, like tonight, right? We all know that we had a little bit of audio-visual issues earlier, so I've picked up the pace a little bit this evening just to make sure that we get everyone off at an adequate time, because we know so many people have responsibilities tomorrow, right? Also, adherence to the schedules, and then handling difficult situations as well. Okay, so we want to make sure of that, and then like we're talking about, right? The pace, excuse me, the pace of the instruction, right? What pace will we roll at right now? Okay. Not only that, also want to make sure that even though we've picked up the pace, that everybody stays on board, and that it doesn't feel excessively rushed, right? But also we want to keep it fast enough. We definitely don't want to go too slow, because we'll start to lose people. Especially tailgate safety meetings, folks. For anybody who's doing tailgate safety meetings, 10, 15 minutes tops. It could be as little as 5, and you should have some decent safety meetings. If you go longer than that, it's going to be really difficult to keep people engaged, okay? Um, Also, adherence to that schedule, right? Trying to start on time, trying to end on time. Perfect example of adherence to the schedule. Okay, maybe also maybe logistics of getting employees to the safety training and meeting. It may be something that may be in walking distance. We may have to get them transported there, right? We maybe have them drive their personally owned vehicles there. So just depending on the situation, right? And then handling difficult situations, of course. Okay. Basically, sometimes we're just going to have difficult situations, or maybe rude people, or awkward situations to contend with, right? So things that we want to keep in mind is this, right? Is that why are we having some of these behaviors, right? What could be leading to some of these problems? Well, the participant, maybe they were forced to attend the class, right? Maybe they didn't want to go. participant, right, doesn't get along with others in the class. I've told people, I've had some classes that I teach that the people are just loners. Okay, so it's it's trying to hopefully make sure that people stay engaged as well. Um, and then of course, also the participant feels that he or she knows as much as more uh, than you do about the topic, right? They think they may know better. I'll give you a perfect example: confined space, right? A lot of times, um, when I do confined space training, many of us think we know it. Well, the first thing I do is this, folks: is I ask you to pull out a pencil, right, piece of paper. I want you to write 1 through 3. Give me the 3 characteristics of a confined space that it's got to have, right? Basically, it's large enough to bodily enter. It's large enough to bodily enter. It's not made for continuous occupancy, and it's got limited means of entry and exit. Okay. So, and then the next thing is, what's the 4 things that can make it a permit required confined space, right? It's going to be atmospheric hazards. It's going to be inward converging walls or configuration. It's going to be that it has the potential to engulf and entrap us, like maybe like an excavation or a silo where there could be a collapse. Okay, and last of all, any other hazard that might be associated, right? So things like that. So a lot of times I've noticed that some people think they have the answer. So I do more quizzes these days. I do more quizzes on the front end than the back end. But then all the answers that I want them to give me is basically the information that I want to know that they've learned in the training class. So I use it as a learning opportunity at the beginning, give them the quiz, and then at the end, their whole job is to have that quiz done, which was the same pre-test, right? Because that's the training material that I want and need from them. And then, of course, the participant is also so overwhelmed by the content that he or she begins to start feeling frustrated. But that's why, folks, just remember, that's why we want to do that whole known to unknown, right? Because the more we do the known to unknown, the easier it is for employees to go ahead and associate and relate to it. Okay. And then course closure. And folks, look, just to let you know, I know we're going on that 9 o'clock, but we are getting to the very end right now, folks. So just to let you know, we probably only got about 5 minutes left or less. Okay. So thanks for bearing with us, because I see that we're right at the 9 o'clock hour right now. So then course closure, right? Once we've completed delivering the training course content and everyone had enough time to practice the modules and the tasks covered during the course, that there are a few things that we need to do before we close out, right? We may need to assess the participants' ability to perform the task, right? So maybe doing like some type of performance evaluation. We may be doing some type of practical or hands-on where we're evaluating them. Also reviewing the course objectives, right? And the participant goals. We did it at the beginning of the training, and we also want to review it at the end of the training, because basically the same course objectives and the participant goals that we started at the beginning, now we're bringing it full circle, and now we want to discuss to make sure that everyone realizes that we did meet what our intended purpose was. Okay. Having the participants evaluate the course, right? We may do an evaluation form or something like that. So, folks, if you don't have an evaluation form, let me see. Let me see if I can. I got a couple of them that we can put together for you. So if anybody needs one, let me see. OSHA 30. No. Yeah, we've got a couple of evaluation forms. So it's not part of the course, but if anybody needs it, reach out to me. Tell me, hey, you want an evaluation form, right, to evaluate your training, and I'll be glad to get it to you. Okay. I'll also make sure that we throw one in the packet for test day and evaluation day, just so you have it as well. Okay. And then verifying attendance and handing out certificates, right? If at the end we're handing out certificates and let's say Jim Smith and Kelly Jones are gone, well, if Jim Smith and Kelly Jones are gone, why are they gone, right? Why aren't they here to obtain their certificate now, right? Did they not complete the course? And if so, we want to make sure we document it. Okay. Hopefully the course wasn't so big to where the training to where we weren't cognizant of who wasn't there to begin with. Okay. And then performance assessment, right? Throughout the demonstrations and the practice exercises, of course, we have to monitor the participants' performance. Like I said, we've got 15 evaluations to do in here, right? That's your performance assessment, folks. Okay. So basically what's going to happen is that we're going to ensure that each participant, right, ends the class able to perform at least the minimal acceptable level of assessments. Okay. So those are those 15 assessments that we're going to be doing. And then there's a remedial training also, if necessary. So if we see that employees are struggling, let me give you an example. If you do confined space entry training, right? In my confined space entry training, one of the main things, like I said, I do a quiz at the going in, and I want the same quiz completed in the end. Okay, they can use their original quiz and their notes because I want to know that they can access the information if they want it and need it, right? And I also know that helped them keep notes as we went along throughout the class. But also, in addition to that, I want them to complete a confined space entry permit now, right? I want them to complete a hot work permit now, if we're doing hot work training, right? Permit training. So I use the tool for the assessment. I use what I'm trying to train them to do. So if I'm trying to train them to better write their permit systems, well, and then that's what I'm gonna train you on, right? And that's what I'm gonna evaluate you on as well. And then reviewing the course objectives and the participant goals, like we talked about, right, is basically at this point we're doing a recap of all the material that we've covered already, and now we're bringing it full circle, and we're doing an evaluation. So if our job was to, like I said, to talk about air quality, and I wanted you to know what safe oxygen levels of oxygen, lower explosive limit are, and toxic gases, well, this is the time that I'm going to bring back, and I would have done it in the beginning. We would have talked through them in the middle, and then at the end, we're going to bring them up one more time so we can kind of close the loop, right? And then reviewing courses, objectives, and participant goals as well. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be reviewing that, and then participation evaluation of the course, right? The participants evaluation. So now it may be their time to evaluate what our presentation was. So if you look at that, if you look at page 911, 9.11, you'll see an example of that, right? So there's an example of one. We've also got one, like I told you, that I'm going to give you as well. And and basically, how'd they feel about the introduction, right? The lesson overview. How'd they feel about the performance overall, right? With different questions. Visual aids, were they, were they helpful? Were they not helpful, right? Were they not applicable at all? And then questioning techniques, right? As well. So we've got, and then if you flip the side, it's a second page. And there you'll see it's questioning. It'll be a summary, right? Gestures and mannerisms. How was my instructor's eye? How was our eye contact? How was our knowledge of the topic, our voice, right? How was our professional attitude? How was our enthusiasm for the subject? If we're constantly knocking the safety practices and constantly knocking the company and OSHA, are we undermining our own training? And look, let me tell you, folks, we all love to get good evaluations, but every once in a while we may get an evaluation or two that are challenged. Okay, so just accept it and let's improve on it, right? I think I tell people all the time. Uh, I don't think it's about perfection. I think it's about continuous improvement in our lives, right? And that goes for our work careers as well. So for me, it's about continuous improvement to make sure that we can continue doing the right safe thing in order to help continue protecting employees and ourselves, right? And the company as well and our clients, okay? And then concluding our training, like we talked about earlier, right? Going ahead and closing the gap, closing the importance of complying, maybe maintaining a competitive edge. So going ahead and concluding that training so that we can use it as one last learning opportunity in order to hit on our highlights. And of course, folks, one thing that we didn't talk in there, and I think I skipped over it, is questions and answers, right? Opinions. I do it in the beginning, middle, and even at the end of the session. I want employees to constantly, if you don't agree, let's talk about it, right? Same thing with all these NCCR folks. I know that y'all can type back and forth, and I know when you're on a mobile device it's hard. But if you have any questions, you call me, right? You text me, you email me, right? Whatever, good, bad, or indifferent. If it's something you agree with and you want more information, you send it to me, right? If it's something you didn't agree with, or maybe I lost you, maybe maybe I went too far out of bounds or something, and you need a little bit better clarification, reach out to me, right? Let's get it straight, okay? So the only way we can really improve, folks, is by being critiqued, right? It's critiquing and being critique, but at the same time, we do want to stay as positive as possible too, right? So it's nobody likes being critiqued on their work. Trust me, I don't. But sometimes it's a necessary evil, right? So, folks, that's it. That is module 9. Okay, that was modules 8 and 9. So we're done for the evening. Next Tuesday, we are going to kick off with 10. As you notice in this book, we have 10 through 18 left. If you look at the thickness of the book, we're well through half of this book now. Okay, so we're making good time. I'm sorry, not Tuesday. Excuse me. I'm sorry. On Thursday. Okay, so we'll resume. We'll resume on Thursday again. I'm hoping on Thursday that we should get right back to our 6:30 schedule as opposed to later. And I apologize for any inconvenience tonight. If any of y'all have any questions, just feel free to hang on the line. I'll be glad to answer them. If not, I'll plan on seeing all of you Thursday. Okay, so give me 1 second, folks. Let me close out the recording, and then I'm gonna keep you on the line for just one moment. Okay.